Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the sun-baked stillness of an ancient Persian courtyard where the bricks are hot enough to fry flatbread and even the shadows sweat a little. The sky above is pale and unforgiving, the kind of dry heat that makes you question your life choices, especially the one that brought you here in wool socks. But don't worry, because just ahead, rising like quiet sentinels above the mud brick rooftops, are the wind towers. Graceful, tall, and strange, they're humming with breeze like they have secrets to share. You probably wouldn't survive this, not in your current state anyway. Not without sunscreen, electrolytes, and a full HVAC system blasting behind you. But here, in the relentless heart of the desert, the ancient Persians figured out how to stay cool without any of those things. They built houses that could breathe, cities that could exhale, entire civilizations where the wind itself became part of the architecture. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is there. I love seeing where in the world we're falling asleep together. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle forward, crunching softly over sand and old stone. The alley narrows, then widens into a sun-dappled courtyard. No tourists, no tour guides, just birdsong and the faint creak of a laundry line. A door hangs ajar, and you step inside. The air is cooler, noticeably so. Your sweat dries just a little. The light changes. The world hushes. This is no magic trick. What you're feeling is the ancient science of survival, specifically air pressure, temperature differentials, and the elegant manipulation of wind. The structure above you, the hollowed tower rising from the roof like a chimney in reverse, is called a badgir, or wind catcher, and it's doing its job quietly, efficiently, without a whisper of electricity. The idea is simple, the execution, brilliant. The badgir catches high, cool air and funnels it down into the living space below, creating a slow, refreshing circulation. No fans, no filters, just gravity, physics, and an intuitive understanding of airflow refined over centuries. Now imagine being the first person to build one. Maybe your neighbor was fanning himself silly with a palm frond, muttering about the price of ice, while your house just breathed. That must have felt good. But it didn't stop with wind towers. The whole house is part of the cooling plan. The walls are thick, sun-baked adobe bricks that insulate like a thermos. The windows are narrow and shaded, the courtyard centered around a pool that gleams with trapped light. Even the floor feels deliberate, cool tile or packed earth that holds on to midnight chill like a secret. Historians still argue whether these architectural techniques evolved purely from trial and error or were part of an intentional system handed down through scholarly texts. Either way, it worked. Your hand grazes the wall. It's smooth and matte, almost velvety from centuries of touch and sun. You feel the faintest shift of air against your wrist. That's not coincidence. That's design. Some of these homes, especially in desert cities like Yazd or Persian, have been breathing like this for over 800 years. And while modern ACs hum and wheeze their expensive song, these houses whisper instead. They shift temperature like seasoned hosts, adjusting just enough to keep the tea warm, but not the guests. And while we're on the topic of tea, yes, people still drank hot tea in this heat. Go figure. You step out into the courtyard again. A small pool reflects the sky. Somewhere, a child laughs. A cat sprawls in the shade, looking smugly ventilated. Above you, the wind tower rises like a lighthouse. It doesn't glow, it doesn't buzz, but it watches the horizon, always alert, always adjusting. The open slats face whatever direction the breeze chooses that day. If the wind shifts, so does the cooling. Even at night, the tower pulls air down into subterranean rooms, some so well insulated they feel like cool caves. Imagine dozing there after a long day, wrapped in cotton sheets, the walls still breathing beside you. No need for lullabies. The house hums its own. And here's something delightful. Badgirs, often paired with underground water channels called qanats, which we'll visit later, but just know this. When air passed over those cool subterranean waterways and rose into the home, instant natural air conditioning without a single burned fossil fuel. You lean back against the courtyard wall, toes in the shade, ears full of pigeons and breeze. Around you, the house creaks and settles like it's exhaling. The heat is still out there, of course, but in here, someone solved it, thoughtfully, gracefully, repeatedly. And they did it with bricks, wind, and wisdom. You stroll deeper into the old neighborhood, where the sun turns mud brick walls a soft honey gold, and shadows stretch like sleepy cats. It's quiet here, not silent, but thick with a hush that only cities this old can carry. Behind each carved wooden door, there's a story. But tonight, you're following one thread in particular, the rise of the Badgir as a symbol of both ingenuity and elegance. It wasn't always this way. Before wind towers became architectural icons, people struggled. You imagine a family in a sun-bleached hut, waving fans made of woven palm, sweating through summer like soup in a pot. The wind came and went as it pleased. Rooms trapped heat like jars. Sleep? That was a privilege reserved for the lucky and the nocturnal. Then someone got clever. Maybe they cut a hole in the roof. Maybe they stacked bricks differently. Maybe they noticed that the high winds blowing off the mountains weren't just a nuisance, they were an opportunity. Historians still argue whether the idea for wind towers came from necessity or imitation. Some say they were inspired by the wind-catching walls of Egypt. Others point to early Mesopotamian cooling systems. But Persia made them sing. The earliest known Badgirs show up in historical records around the 9th century, though the technique likely predates that. By the 13th century, they weren't just useful, they were beautiful. People started competing. Taller towers, more elaborate vents, dual-directional designs that could catch wind from opposite sides. You pause beneath one now, its edges softened by time. Up close, you notice the details. Stucco patterns curling like vines, narrow slots angled to the breeze. Even the shadow it casts is elegant. Inside, a homeowner might point proudly to its craftsmanship, just as someone today might show off their double-glazed windows or whisper about their Nest thermostat. There's a fringe theory, mildly delightful, that some wind towers were tuned to hum when the breeze hit just right, like desert flutes. No one's proven it, but it would explain the occasional traveler's journal describing singing houses. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Some Badgirs weren't just passive structures. They were connected to qanats, those underground aqueducts we mentioned earlier. Picture this, a tunnel of cool water running beneath the home, and a shaft that draws air over it, cooling it further, before releasing it into the room. Suddenly, you're not just surviving the heat, you're thriving in it. You pass a building where a collapsed Badgir leans like a broken sail. The rest of the house still stands, proud and shaded, but the missing tower leaves a silence you can feel. It's like the house forgot how to breathe. Nearby, a craftsman chips away at a new tower's base. The tools are simple, chisel, mallet, hands, but the rhythm is eternal. You can almost hear a chorus of ancient builders echoing through time, tapping the same song. In Yezd, where the Badgir became a signature feature, entire skylines ripple with their silhouettes. Tall, narrow spines reaching up like the fingers of someone begging the sky for breeze and being answered. Some towers were even hybrid designs,
Open to the wind in summer, closed and covered in winter to prevent cold drafts. Versatile, clever, surprisingly cozy. You duck into one such home, and the scent of old dust and rosewater greets you. There's a low table, a bowl of fresh dates, a book of poetry left half open beside a stone cup. Life here moved slowly, yes, but it moved intentionally. In the corner of the room, a small wooden flap covers a duct. You open it, just a little. A whisper of air glides in. Not strong, not dramatic, but enough. Enough to keep the room alive. Remember how people used to sleep on rooftops? Still do in some places. But if you were lucky enough to have a wind tower over your room, you didn't have to climb. You stayed below, swaddled in a linen sheet, lulled by the rhythmic breath of the badgir above. There's even an old folk tale, probably told to get kids to bed, about a wind spirit that lived in the towers, watching over sleepers and whisking away nightmares on a puff of cold air. If your tower didn't breathe one night, it meant the spirit had gone walking. You hoped it returned by morning. You head back outside. The breeze picks up, carrying the smell of jasmine and something faintly earthy, dust perhaps, or the memory of distant rain. You tilt your face to the wind and wonder how many people stood just like this, feeling this exact same air, filtered through mud brick and patience. Back in modern cities, the sound of air conditioning is a constant hum, electric and dry. But here you realize the silence is the sound. The stillness is alive. The wind speaks when it's needed, and the houses listen. A family passes by, two children chasing each other with reed fans. Their laughter bounces off the walls. Above them, their home watches through the slatted eyes of a badgir, welcoming the night with its ancient, quiet breath.
You wake, or maybe you never quite slept, on the cool floor of a courtyard. The stone beneath your back holds the last sigh of the night's breeze, and the air is just beginning to warm. Morning is coming to the desert, slow and golden. You sit up, stretch, and watch as a woman carefully pours water across the flagstones. Not to clean, to cool. Evaporation. It's one of those principles you vaguely remember from school, somewhere between condensation and convection. But here it's not theory, it's life. A little water, a little patience, and suddenly the ground stops radiating yesterday's heat. It's clever, quiet science in sandals and a linen robe. She works without speaking, her bare feet leaving damp prints behind her. Overhead, the badgir stirs to life again. It hasn't caught full wind yet, but you can sense its readiness, like a cat on a windowsill waiting for the sun. The entire house is built to cooperate with heat. Ceilings curve high to gather rising air. Walls are thick, with tiny windows placed not for the view, but for the angle of the sun. Light here doesn't blast. It filters, trickles, lands softly, like this house has made an agreement with the climate. I won't fight you if you don't fight me. You wander into a domed room, maybe once a guest hall. The temperature drops noticeably. No fans, no vents, just stone, shadow, and a well-placed opening high above that catches a gentle drift of air. It moves so slowly, so subtly, that you don't notice until the candle on the table flickers. Historians still argue whether these cooling methods developed intuitively or through systematic experimentation. Were generations of architects fine-tuning over centuries, or did a few lucky guesses become tradition? Either way, the result is elegant, passive cooling in its most poetic form. You reach out and touch the wall, mud brick, smooth and slightly cool. Earth turned to shelter. Straw and clay, baked by the same sun it's now defending against. You could write a whole book on this wall and still not cover the way it feels against your fingertips. There's a fringe belief, whispered more than recorded, that homes built in this style could
remember the wind. That after decades of catching the breeze just so, the bricks themselves learn to hold it a little longer. You want to believe that. Elsewhere in the house, thick curtains of woven reeds hang over the doorways. They've been soaked in water. As the air passes through them, it cools. You walk through one and feel it immediately. A 5-degree drop just from wet grass and wind. It's not luxury, it's survival made gentle. Some households even hung ceramic jugs of water at the base of their bed gears. The wind would pass over the water, pick up its coolness, and sweep it into the room like a shy servant offering refreshment. You find one such jug now, nestled into a shallow niche. The water inside is faintly dusty, but drinkable. A clay cup rests beside it. You pour yourself a sip. It tastes old, in a good way, like a story that's been told many times and only gets better. And it wasn't just homes that used these techniques. You wandered to the edge of the neighborhood and find what might once have been a yakchal, a domed ice house, partially buried, used to store winter ice deep underground, insulated by thick walls and cooled by bed gears above. Yes, that's right, ice, in the desert, without electricity. There's a ladder nearby. You descend carefully into the cool chamber. Even now, centuries later, the air is 20 degrees cooler than outside. A dry chill, the kind that makes you want to wrap yourself in a shawl, not out of need, but ceremony. Some records describe these structures as communal treasures. Everyone contributed to their upkeep. The ice harvested in winter was doled out slowly, sparingly, to the sick, the elderly, or during festivals. It wasn't hoarded, it was honored. You climb back up into the heat and feel it slap you like a wet cloth. But then the wind shifts and the bad gears answer. One catches the breeze just right and begins to channel it down. You stand in its path, and for a moment, you're weightless. Children used to play this game, standing under the tower with their arms outstretched, eyes closed, trying to guess how strong the wind would be today. The braver ones would dare to climb up and peek inside the shaft. You'd find dust, birds' nests, sometimes a surprise lizard who'd taken up a residence in the coolest spot in the house. You smile at the thought. Somewhere, there's probably a folk tale about a lizard who guarded the secrets of wind. If not, there should be. As midday approaches, the neighborhood contracts. People move slowly, deliberately. Doors close, curtains are drawn, but the homes keep breathing. Thanks to the towers, thanks to the water, thanks to centuries of trial, error, and dust-covered wisdom. You sit in the courtyard again. The woman has finished her watering. She rests now under a canopy of grapevines, peeling fruit with a knife so old the handle has worn grooves for each finger. She catches your gaze and offers a smile. No words, just a breeze.
The sun rises higher, and the world outside starts to bake. But here, in the shadowed interior of this ancient Persian home, you stay remarkably cool. You move quietly, like someone who belongs here, although you're always aware you don't. The walls don't care. They were built for anyone seeking shade. You drift into what was once a kitchen. No metal appliances, no chrome finishes, just clay, ash, and ingenious simplicity. A tandoor oven yawns in the floor, its mouth blackened from centuries of flame. Beside it, bundles of dried herbs hang upside down, thyme, sumac, and something sharp and citrusy you can't quite name. Each one tied with string, each one patiently waiting to flavor something wonderful. You run your finger along a low stone shelf. It's not perfectly level. Nothing here is, but it feels correct, like the house has settled into itself. You imagine a woman in a teal scarf, kneeling here to grind walnuts into paste, a boy chasing his runaway sandal across the tiles, a grandfather pulling a date from a jar, inspecting it like it might be gold. Everything here is still, but also full. A soft buzzing drifts through a half-open shutter. Bees again. You follow the sound to a small window and peer out at a courtyard garden, its borders crowded with potted mint and a scraggly pomegranate tree. In the corner, a donkey is asleep in the shade, its ears twitching. A girl sits on the garden steps with a copper bowl of soaked lentils, tossing small handfuls to the pigeons. You wonder if this is real, or memory, or just a dream built out of clay and breeze. Historians still argue whether these homes were constructed around the wind towers or if towers were added later as cooling became more essential. Some old city maps suggest that badgirs only appeared in elite homes at first and gradually trickled down into everyday use, like an early, dignified version of central air. You step through the kitchen door and find yourself in a passageway that hugs the north side of the house. Always shaded, always the coolest route between rooms. The badger hums gently above you, not quite a sound, more like a presence, a reminder that the air is still moving, even when you aren't. A small doorway opens into what was probably a sleeping room. There's a platform bed covered in a faded woven mat, and a narrow shelf holding 3 clay oil lamps. Only one of them is full. You wonder how often it was used and how many nights were passed by its flickering light. Maybe some teenage poet sat here long after curfew, scribbling odes to a girl who didn't like him back. The badger vent opens directly into this room. A clay funnel protrudes from the wall, angled to catch the breeze. Beside it, a low ceramic basin sits, once filled with water to moisten the incoming air. You hold your hand above it and feel a whisper of movement. It's cooler here than in the rest of the house, by just a few degrees, but it's enough to notice, enough to matter. In one corner, a tall ceramic jar stands half buried in the floor. You lift the lid and find dried rose petals, still faintly fragrant, used in tea or perhaps to scent linens. You smile. Some things don't change. A tiny lizard darts across the floor, then pauses on a crack in the wall. You both stare at each other for a moment, equally surprised. It vanishes under a cushion. You're not even mad. You lie back on the mat, arms behind your head, and stare up at the domed ceiling. It curves like the inside of a seashell, painted with a faded blue, so pale it's almost gone. A few gold flecks remain. Stars maybe, or flowers. Your eyes follow the line of the dome until it narrows into a small vent. Another air shaft. Always the wind. Always invited. You close your eyes just briefly and listen. Not to words, to breeze, to birds in the fig tree outside, to the soft creak of the reed curtain shifting in another room. There's a fringe theory that the alignment of certain homes in their towers was astrological, that some architects angled them to align with star paths or seasonal winds believed to have spiritual properties. Others say it's nonsense. But as you lie here, cool and still, it feels possible, or at least poetic. Outside, you hear the gentle clang of metal, a spoon against a pot. A meal is being prepared. Someone hums a tune so faint it might not exist. You imagine the food, rice scented with saffron, dates stuffed with walnuts, cucumber slices soaking in vinegar and mint. You're not even hungry, but your stomach purrs in approval. You rise slowly, brush off a few stray bits of straw from your sleeve, and return to the hallway. There's a small alcove you hadn't noticed before. Inside it, a mosaic fountain, dry now, but still beautiful. Blue tiles, worn smooth, forming patterns of fish and leaves. A brass spout shaped like a lion's mouth. You run a finger along the edge of one tile. It's chipped. Perfectly imperfect. In the hottest months, this fountain would have been filled every morning, its splash cooling both air and soul. Children likely dipped their feet in it or whispered secrets over its rim. You lean down and imagine the sound of the water again, the way it would echo softly off the walls, mixing with the wind from above, a duet of cooling. You stay a moment longer, letting the memory of that sound settle over you like a blanket. Then you stand and move on. You step out from the sleeping room into the courtyard, blinking in the brighter light. It isn't blinding, thanks to a series of latticed awnings strung like woven shadows across the upper walls, but it's brighter than the rooms you've left behind. The air here feels warmer, but it's moving, always moving, and the badger is still at work. You tilt your head upward and see it again, rising above the roofline like a solemn sentinel. 4 narrow faces, each one open to a different direction, each channeling air down into the house. Some badgers were square, others octagonal. This one is square, modest, without decorative tile, but proud in its functionality. And old, you can feel it. You circle slowly around the courtyard. The paving stones under your feet are uneven and cool where shadows linger. At the center of the yard is a shallow basin, not quite a fountain, just a depression in the stone where water was once stored or collected after rain. Now it's dry, dusted with a few fallen pomegranate petals. You pause near the wall. An old wooden ladder leans against the bricks, warped but strong enough. With a moment's hesitation, you climb it, slowly, carefully, each rung reminding you that yes, wood weathers, but it also remembers how to hold weight. At the top, the rooftop opens before you like a quiet plain, flat and welcoming, surrounded by a low parapet wall. The view stretches to other rooftops, other badgers, each rising like a chess piece in the distance. A few have cloth screens over their mouths, others stand open, ready to inhale whatever breeze comes next. From this vantage point, the city reveals its true shape, not from the chaos of alleys or the noise of bazaars, but from the way the houses nest together like sleeping animals. This is how you know they were designed to share wind, to not hoard comfort, but to pass it along. Historians still argue whether wind towers were an imported idea, perhaps brought by merchants from Egypt or Mesopotamia, or whether Persians devised them independently, inspired by watching how wind bent reed fields and cooled open wells. The debate continues, but standing here, you start to believe the landscape itself taught them. You sit on a rolled rug left on the roof, its fibers sun-bleached and slightly crispy. From here you can see laundry lines strung between domes, white cloth flapping like sleepy flags. A cat slinks along the edge of the parapet, with scandalous grace, pauses, then disappears behind a chimney. The wind changes direction. You don't see it, you feel it. A new breeze slides across your face. It smells of distant gardens, crushed herbs, and, yes, bread. Somewhere, someone has started baking. You notice that the badger below you has an internal divider, a vertical partition inside its shaft. These were designed to split airflow, maximizing the chance of catching even the slightest draft. You peer down into the shaft and glimpse the angled slats that direct air downward, sometimes over a water basin for extra cooling. It's architectural choreography, breeze as dance partner. You lie back on the rooftop, arms outstretched, staring at the pale blue sky. A bird circles above, then another. You count them, but lose track. Numbers don't matter up here. A fringe theory suggests badgers were sometimes used for more than air. Some say people whispered messages through them like medieval intercoms across the gaps between rooftops. Others claim they amplified music from lutes and flutes during festival nights. Could be true. Sound moves like air after all. Below, you hear a door creak. The girl with the lentils has disappeared, and now there's only the rustle of plants and the clink of pottery. The world is full of tiny noises if you let it be quiet enough. You think about the people who built this house, not just the architect, but the laborers who shaped the bricks, the women who ground lime for plaster, the children who carried water to mix mortar. Their hands are gone, but their work remains. You roll onto your side and notice a small dome-shaped structure on a neighboring rooftop, a cupola, likely used to cap a wind tower. This one is cracked at the top. Maybe it let in starlight. Maybe it just never got repaired. Either way, it adds character, like a chipped tooth on a friendly face. The rooftop offers perspective. You realize how cleverly the Badgear rises above all other parts of the house, always the tallest, always unobstructed. The first to greet the wind, the last to let it go. A breeze tickles your ankle. You glance down and see an old wooden vent near the floor, another access point for air designed to circulate across sleeping bodies in the night. The system is so passive, so silent, it feels magical. But it's just engineering and patience. You sit up and dust off your palms. It's nearly midday. The rooftops shimmer slightly, a mirage of heat. But you're not hot. You're balanced, between air and earth, between sun and shade, between history and dream. You climb down the ladder and step back into the courtyard. The air inside is cool again. The Badgear did its work while you were away. At the base of the tower, you find a small ceramic jar with a lid. You lift it and discover dried lime slices inside, used to scent the water in the cooling basin. Not because anyone had to, just because it made the breeze feel fresher. The small things mattered. They still do.
You linger in the courtyard, tracing your fingertips along the low basin's rim. The stone is cool to the touch, worn smooth by years of quiet use. Maybe the space once held water from the qanats, those underground channels that wound for miles, funneling meltwater from the distant Zagros Mountains. You imagine the journey that water took, across stone, through darkness, only to arrive here and shimmer in the stillness of an afternoon breeze. You move toward the doorway that leads to the kitchen. The transition is subtle. There's no grand arch, no mosaic announcement, just a soft change in scent. You breathe in cumin, clay, old garlic, and a faint sweetness, perhaps dates or something that once was. The kitchen is dim, but not unpleasantly so. Slatted wooden shutters let in streaks of light, like fingers running through flour. You pause in the center and listen. There's no one here now, but you can hear echoes, the scrape of a pestle in a stone bowl, the rattle of metal spoons in a worn basket, the sigh of someone trying to decide if a stew needs salt or silence. There, near the hearth, you find another vent. This one's low, built into the base of the outer wall, a companion to the Badgear above. You crouch beside it and hold your palm near the opening. Air, cool, faintly sweet, lightly tinged with smoke, whispers past your skin. This isn't wind, it's breath. You realize then the wind tower alone isn't enough. The house relies on design, on understanding pressure and heat and the laziness of warm air that prefers to rise. These homes were built not just to exist, but to breathe. Historians still argue whether these ventilation systems were based more on trial and error or on carefully transmitted engineering knowledge. Perhaps both. Perhaps a little girl noticed where her doll stayed cold in the heat. Perhaps a mason learned from his grandfather that walls should curve a certain way to invite shadows. You look up again. The kitchen walls are thick, nearly a meter. Their density isn't just strength, it's insulation. During the day, they absorb heat. At night, they release it slowly, letting the house avoid extremes, a kind of thermal storytelling. You approach a long wooden shelf against the far wall. Earthenware bowls line the ledge, each one covered with a cloth or a flat ceramic lid. In one, dried rose petals. In another, rice grains. A third holds what looks like almonds, or maybe apricot kernels. You lift a lid and catch a whiff of dried limes, tart, bitter, sun-preserved. On a smaller table, near the wall, there's a pitcher and a simple cup. The pitcher is tall, with a narrow neck and bulbous base. It's made of porous clay, yakchal style, designed to sweat and cool the water inside through evaporation. You pour a little into the cup and sip. It's surprisingly cool. Maybe not cold, but fresh in a way that makes you feel lucky to be thirsty here. You spot a small square window high on the wall, near the roofline. That's another part of this system. High vents that let rising warm air escape. The bodgir pulls cool air down. The kitchen floor stays low and shaded. The thick walls delay heat, and the hot air sneaks out quietly at the top. A whole orchestra of stone and wind, and you're standing in the silence between notes. You cross to the far end of the kitchen where a bundle of herbs hangs upside down from a hook. Mint, thyme, maybe something spicier. Beneath them sits a clay jar with beeswax seal. You lift the lid slightly. Vinegar, or perhaps something pickled. The scent grabs your nose and refuses to apologize. A clay pot has a fine crack running down one side. Someone tried to mend it with a bit of metal wire and plaster. You trace the repair, marveling at the patience it must have taken. Nothing thrown away, nothing without a second purpose. A fringe theory claims that certain kitchens had wind paths mapped into their floors, like invisible roads where cold air was encouraged to flow. Some say children could feel them when they played barefoot indoors, little rivers of air across sun-warmed tiles. You wonder if that's just a memory that someone turned into architecture. You find a clay stove built into the floor itself, blackened but clearly used. Next to it, a flat stone grinding slab, like a sleepier cousin of the ones you saw in that Javanese kitchen in your dreams. You picture someone kneeling here, pressing garlic and herbs into a paste, adding a dash of dried rose, a sprinkle of salt, tasting, sighing, starting over. The air stirs again. The bodgir hums faintly overhead, though you can't hear it. You just feel its work, the shifting of breath in the room, the slow exhale of a house that was never dead, just quiet. There's a wooden stool near the wall, smoothed by time, legs uneven but confident. You sit and close your eyes. For a moment, you imagine what it would be like to spend a lifetime in this kitchen, not cooking for banquets or royal feasts, but for normal hunger, everyday stews, flatbread breakfasts, sour yogurt lunches. A woman might have worked here, whistling softly as she crushed herbs with the heel of her hand. Maybe a boy fetched water from the jar, splashing half of it down his tunic. Maybe a man returned from the market with too many onions and not enough lentils, and dinner became an improvisation. The wind shifts again. You feel it sweep across the floor, tug at the hem of your robe, then vanish. You breathe in deeply, tasting the coolness that doesn't belong to a machine. This isn't electric air. It's earned.
You rise from the stool slowly, as if the room might fold back into silence without you. The kitchen has told its story of air that moves with purpose, and homes that were not merely shelter, but systems of balance. You step back out into the courtyard, where the light has shifted. The sun hangs lower now, casting slanted shadows across the tiles and deepening the gold in every surface. Beyond the courtyard wall, you hear a rustling, a soft flutter, rhythmic and repeated. Curious, you follow the sound past a wooden gate that leads into a narrow side alley between houses. Here, small gardens and domestic spaces cluster like secrets. You pass a child's abandoned ball, a broken broom, and then you see it. A woman standing on a low platform, beating a patterned carpet with a flat paddle. Dust rises around her in gentle clouds. She wears a faded indigo tunic, hem dusted with flour or ash. Her motions are steady, unrushed. With every strike, the dust escapes and drifts in the sunlight like whispers from the carpet's memory. You pause to watch, unnoticed for now. Just another figure beneath the watching sky. Behind her, there's a raised storage loft with lattice windows, open to the air, shaded but not sealed. Inside, long bundles of dried herbs, baskets of dates, cloth sacks tied with twine. This is another part of the house's cooling logic. Storage elevated and ventilated, not sealed in tight darkness like a medieval cellar. You step closer and feel the faint breath of wind trickling through the wooden slats, cooling even the sugar inside the date basket. Historians still debate whether these elevated storage areas were purely practical or also symbolic, high places for the preservation of food and fortune. Some believe certain lofts doubled as meditation nooks or spots for secret conversation. Others suggest their height was simply about keeping mice away and letting air do its slow, invisible work. The woman pauses her carpet beating and glances your way. You nod, and she nods back, then returns to her rhythm. The sound echoes gently in the alley, like a lullaby made of labor. You notice a line of clay pots set along the alley wall. Some are sealed, some open. One contains tamarind paste, another dried yogurt curls, another a mixture of herbs steeping in oil under a mesh lid. Cooling, fermenting, changing, not through fire, but through time and breeze. The wind doesn't just keep you from sweating, it also teaches you patience. At the alley's far end, a boy chases a cloth kite between two mud brick walls. His laughter bounces off the stones, carried by the current. You follow the breeze, letting it guide you further to another home, another courtyard, this one slightly more grand. Here, a man in a saffron tunic stands beside a pool not for drinking, but for reflection. The surface is still, though occasionally broken by a drop from a hanging planter. This is no accident. The wind tower above him has been positioned to draw cool air over the water surface, further reducing the temperature as it flows into the home's interior. Evaporative cooling, ancient addition. You approach the pool, noting the details, carved tiles beneath the surface, a lotus motif repeating in soft teal and ochre. The man dips his fingers into the water and sighs, not because he's hot, but because he's home. A fringe theory once suggested that some homes included secret wind maps embedded in their designs, inscribed in tile work or carved into lintels, marking ideal airflow routes. No proof has been found. Yet, as you stand here, feeling the breeze shift around the pool and slip past your sleeves, you can't help but believe in the possibility. To your right, a narrow stairwell leads upward, wrapping the inner courtyard wall like a careful thread. You ascend it slowly, hand grazing the rough plaster. At the top, you emerge onto a flat rooftop shaded by a lattice canopy. The view expands across clustered rooftops, domes in the distance, narrow alleys like veins beneath the skin of the city. The wind here is stronger. It moves your clothing slightly, cool against the late heat of the day. From this vantage, you spot at least a dozen other wind towers, some tall and ornate, others squat and humble. A skyline not of glass and steel, but of breath and intention. One tower bears painted stripes, perhaps decorative, perhaps a family mark. Another leans slightly, like it has a story to tell. Yet another is crowned with pottery shards, either for art or to discourage birds.
each one listens to the wind in its own way. A few rooftops are occupied, an old man shelling nuts into a copper bowl, a girl drawing chalk stars on the plaster. Rooftops were not forbidden places here. They were open, purposeful, sacred in a quiet way. A place for cooling off, for talking softly, for letting the wind finish your sentence when words fail. You settle on a low bench and let your thoughts drift. Somewhere below, someone is preparing lentils. Someone else is telling a story that may or may not be true. Someone is brushing their hair, counting stars, lighting a lamp that flickers as the air stirs. The man by the pool below steps inside, leaving the surface still. The reflection holds, briefly. Then a single breath of wind ripples across it, and the moment fades.
You linger a little longer on the rooftop, soaking in the layered hush of the city at dusk. The air carries more now than just breeze. It brings scent. Distant fires, slow-cooked lentils, the sharpness of cardamom ground fresh. Somewhere, someone has just broken open a dried lime. You can almost taste the tang on your tongue. The city is exhaling. Turning toward the nearest wind tower, you study it more closely. Its interior is simple. Vertical shafts, intersecting channels, nothing ornate, but the logic of it is mesmerizing. This one is cross-shaped at the top, divided into 4 vertical ducts to catch wind from any direction. You hear a faint whispering as air slides through and down. A light touch of humidity clings to your skin, and yet the breeze remains dry. That's the brilliance. In the desert, it's not just about cool, it's about dryness. Sweat must evaporate, air must move. This wind tower, like dozens around it, understands this perfectly. Below you, near another courtyard, you see a group of workers beginning to carry large jugs into a shaded room. The jugs are pale clay, rounded, with narrow necks. Amphora of a sort, though not for wine. These are filled with water, and they're going into what looks like a storage room, a cold room. The Persians called these yakshals, though that word's more properly used for their ancient ice houses. This, more humbly, is a cooled larder. It works not by magic, but by airflow and clever insulation. Water in porous clay jugs slowly evaporates, cooling itself. Air, guided by the wind tower, flows over them, further cooling the room. One jug slips slightly from a worker's hands and knocks against another. A deep, earthy sound, like a bell underwater. No one speaks. They've done this 1,000 times. The rhythm is part of the structure. And, like any good rhythm, it reassures. You move back through the house, this time following the air instead of the architecture. The passageways are narrow but high-ceilinged. Windows are few but well-placed. You pass a small clay niche filled with dried rose petals, a bowl of salt near a threshold. Maybe it's for luck. Maybe it's for preserving the air's clarity. Historians still argue whether these domestic talismans had practical roots or purely symbolic ones. Did salt truly absorb bad spirits or just moisture? Did rose petals repel pests or merely delight the senses? Either way, the house seems better for them. You emerge into a second courtyard, more shaded than the first. This one hosts a small fountain, a simple stone basin with a copper pipe feeding it. The water is still, save for where it meets the air and cools it. You realize this courtyard sits lower than the rest of the house, sunken intentionally, cooler by design. A young boy sits near the fountain, drawing in the dust with a stick. He hums, off-key but content. His feet are dusty, his tunic of faded teal. He notices you but doesn't speak, offering a half-smile as if to say, "Yes, this is where the breeze hides." Behind him, a door opens and an elderly man steps out. He carries a fan, not to wave, but to hang on the wall. The house doesn't need him to cool it. It needs him to believe it's still doing so. He hangs the fan on the peg,
pauses, then slowly lowers himself to a bench under the fig tree. You catch the smell of ripe fruit. You remember something odd, a fringe theory from an obscure scholar who once claimed that fig trees themselves were chosen not just for food or shade, but for their scent, which mingled with wind to create a kind of scented comfort field. Others dismissed the idea. Still, as the breeze carries a sweet green note to you, you think he might have been onto something. From the bench, the old man opens a small wooden box. Inside are cards, hand-painted, worn at the edges. He starts to lay them out in the courtyard dust, not to play, but to remember. Maybe a game he used to play with someone gone. Maybe just a habit. He looks up briefly and catches your eye. You nod again. He nods slower. Beyond the fig tree, the back wall of the courtyard is punctuated with small, high vents. These lead to another wind shaft, one that doesn't run vertical, but diagonal, down into the earth. Beneath the house is a qanat, an underground aqueduct. The air passing over its cool, damp tunnel is drawn upward, mixed with the courtyard air, and distributed through the home. It's not just wind, it's tempered breath. You rest your palm near one of the wall vents and feel it. Not a breeze, not a gust, but a quiet sigh, as if the earth itself is exhaling. You exhale too. Some say the Persian engineers who perfected these wind systems were descendants of the Zoroastrian fire keepers, but instead of tending flame, they tended flow. Instead of protecting heat, they preserved balance. Air, water, earth, all in conversation. The boy has now drawn a spiral in the dust and is tracing it with one finger. The old man hums something tuneless. A dove lands near the fountain and drinks. Then a new breeze enters the courtyard, fresher, cooler, with a sharper edge. It carries the smell of night. The woman from earlier steps into the courtyard with a bowl of soaked lentils. She glances up at the wind tower, then at the boy, then at the sky. There's no rush in movement. The lentils will cook or they won't. The wind will keep blowing or it won't. But she knows this house is already cooler than the world beyond its walls. You sit beside the fountain, close your eyes, and imagine the wind tower above you, a throat for the house, a silent flute played only by nature. Its song is subtle, but constant, not loud enough to shout over daily life, but always there, like a hush between words, a breeze between thoughts.
You're not quite sure how long you've been sitting by the fountain, but time seems to slacken in the gentle pull of that courtyard breeze. The scent of lentils mingling with cumin wafts in from somewhere deeper in the house, and for a moment you wonder if the wind tower carries aromas as much as it does coolness, like a passive cook's assistant stirring invisible pots. You rise slowly and step into a covered corridor, the walls brushed with ochre and lined with faded murals, mostly floral, geometric, and a few with birds in abstract flight. The air here is a little stiller, but not warm. Instead, it feels filtered, as if the house, like some courteous host, has strained the harshness out of the afternoon. You duck through a low archway and find yourself in a storage room, a pantry of sorts. Earthen jars are stacked on shelves, their wax-sealed tops labeled in looping Persian script. One has cracked open slightly, and inside, small orange apricots have dried themselves into a concentrated sun. You almost hear them whispering their sweetness. At the far end of the room, in a corner, is a squat, porous clay urn wrapped in damp cloth. This is a zir, and it holds water. Cool water. Not by magic, by evaporation. The damp cloth draws heat from the urn, which then chills the water inside. Simple. Brilliant. It's like asking a stone to do the work of a glacier. You dip a ladle in and sip. The water is startlingly fresh, like someone bottled a breeze. Your teeth feel it first, then your spine. Then a brief rush of clarity, like your thoughts have been hung out on a clothesline to dry. Historians still argue whether these water-cooling methods spread westward into early Roman and Andalusian architecture or developed in parallel. What's certain is that the Persian system never forgot its purpose: to make harsh living gentler, quieter, and more bearable without spectacle. Back out in the corridor, you pause beneath a high wooden grate set into the wall. Behind it lies the qanat, a dark channel carrying mountain-cooled water underfoot. It gargles faintly, like a secret conversation between stone and stream. The air wafting from it smells faintly of moss and minerals. You breathe in. Your lungs feel cleaner. The house seems to breathe too. It inhales through the wind tower, exhales through vents and grates, moves water through underground veins. The whole system is an organism, a desert symbiote engineered not for show, but for survival. You drift onward and find yourself in a narrow back room. Here, the walls are thicker, and the only window is a wooden lattice, carved with delicate patterns of stars and hexagons. Light spills through in honey-colored beams. A sleeping mat lies beneath it, and on it, an open scroll of poetry curls gently in the breeze. The verses are worn from handling. You read one fragment aloud under your breath. What wind cools the heart, if not the one that passed through rose and shade? Someone once napped here, probably often. The mat is shaped by use. The pillow is sunken. The spot by the scrolls smells faintly of rosewater and old ink. And here's the secret, isn't it? Cooling wasn't just for survival. It was for restoration, for clarity, for thought. A cooled room meant a clearer mind. A clearer mind meant better verses, or at least ones with fewer rhymes involving pomegranates. There's a quiet argument among historians whether wind towers were ever used for religious purposes, ritual cleansing or sacred cooling before prayer. Some believe certain designs intentionally directed air toward prayer niches or ablution fountains. Others say that's reading too much into coincidence. But here, standing in the hush, it's easy to believe that spiritual ease and physical comfort were deeply entwined. You walk to the end of the room and open a low wooden hatch. Cool air spills out immediately, like a sigh trapped in a jar. Inside is a small chamber, no bigger than a cupboard. This is the coldest point in the house, a convergence of currents, a culmination of clever design. You lean in and place your hand inside. The temperature drops by several degrees. Your fingertips tingle. A folded cloth bundle lies in the corner. Herbs, perhaps, or fruit kept from spoiling, or maybe letters. Secrets need cool storage, too. Outside, the wind tower hums faintly. The sun has nearly set, and the air outside must be warm, dense, thick with dust and tired footsteps. But inside, this small pocket of stillness remains untouched. It's like the house carved a sanctuary out of climate, kept it safe, and offered it freely. Back out in the main room, the old man from before has fallen asleep on the bench. The boy has vanished. The fig tree watches over them both, its leaves shifting in the soft light. A single fruit drops with a muffled plop onto the dry ground. You pause. You listen. The sound is not silence. It's breath. The house breathes just as you do. Wind through tower, air through duct, water under floor. It's all one soft system, one ancient lullaby of architecture. And this is what comfort used to look like. Not gadgets or wires, not thermostats and hums, just earth, air, water, stone, and an engineer with patience. You find a seat by the lattice window and rest your back against the wall. The breeze through the carving paints your arms with moving patterns of light and air. You close your eyes, not to sleep, but to see it better. The system, the slowness of it, the sanity of it. There is nothing to fix, nothing to adjust. The house has already thought of you. All you have to do is breathe.
Somewhere near the roofline, a dove coos once and flutters off. You catch its shadow briefly across the far wall, a soft, wavering silhouette. Then it's gone. Above, the wind tower continues its steady work, invisible but persistent. You wonder now, how exactly did they build this thing? You rise, stretch, and wander toward a narrow stairwell tucked behind a carved wooden screen. The steps are shallow and cool underfoot, worn smooth by generations. They spiral up, not tightly, but lazily, until you emerge into a covered rooftop terrace open to the pale evening sky. The wind tower looms just ahead. From below it was quiet. From here it's intimate. 4 vertical shafts rise like silent sentinels, each facing a different direction, their mouths open wide to catch whatever breeze might drift past. They look almost like the sails of a ship, waiting for wind. You reach out and place a hand against the nearest one. It's warm from the sun, but the air spilling out from its center is cool, crisp, a silent exhale from deep within the structure. You peer into the opening. Inside, wooden slats help guide the wind downward, redirecting flow into the home's heart. Some towers used ceramic or woven reeds, others simple geometry. The design varies by region, but the purpose never does. These were the lungs of desert cities, breathing in the unbearable and exhaling something livable. Historians still debate how early these towers emerged. Some trace them to the Achaemenid era, others to even earlier Elamite influences. What's agreed upon is that by the time of the Sassanids and later Islamic dynasties, they had been refined into an art form, an art of survival. You walk along the terrace, stopping beneath a hanging basket where herbs dry, basil, thyme, and something peppery you can't quite place. Even up here, small comforts wait. A pigeon nest perches in the corner. A brass basin gleams in the last of the sun. Turning, you look out over the city. Rooftops stretch in every direction, many crowned with wind towers of their own, some tall, some stout, some slender and elegant like minarets that forgot to sing. It's a forest of breath, an entire skyline shaped not by greed or glass, but by temperature. A breeze brushes your cheek, and you remember something. In Yazd, an ancient city in Iran, the locals still use wind towers today, not because they have to, but because they work. They're quieter than air conditioners, gentler than fans. They don't break, they don't buzz. They're just there, catching wind, guiding it home. There's a legend in Yazd, actually, about a wind tower so perfectly built that it could whisper to the one across town. Lovers used it, apparently, to send secrets through the air. Whether that's true, or simply the poetry of people in love with clever things, no one can say. But as you stand here, with the breeze dancing between towers, it feels plausible. Sweet nonsense, carried on clean wind. You step closer to the tower's central shaft, now open at this height like a well turned inside out. Below you hear it, the air gliding down, caught and pulled by thermal differences, by cunning geometry, by ancient intuition. The structure is entirely passive, no moving parts, no fuel, no switches, just heat and light, just the endless choreography of physics and purpose. One corner of the rooftop is shaded by a small awning. Beneath it, a low table holds a chipped ceramic cup, half full of rosewater. The scent is faint but soothing, clinging to the evening like a lullaby that forgot its words. You sit beside it. You exhale. Your skin, warmed by sun, now cools with the evening wind. And the house, this clever, breathing thing, welcomes your sigh, like it's been waiting for it. Below, the streets are quieting. Lanterns glow dimly. A distant flute begins to play a wandering melody, aimless and tender, like a memory you can't quite place. Even that sound seems filtered through the wind tower, softened and slowed, like it knows not to startle you now. You imagine the builder of this place centuries ago, checking the angles, testing the brick with his hands, placing a palm over the air duct just like you did. Did he smile when the wind first shifted? Did he whisper, "There it is"? Did he know it would last this long? Some historians suggest wind towers were symbols of status. Only wealthier households had the space or means to install them. Others argue the technology was eventually democratized, with even humble homes incorporating smaller versions. Regardless, each one tells the same story: how ingenuity can triumph not through force, but through elegance. You glance upward. The stars are beginning to show, and above the tower's mouth a single bat loops through the cooling air. It flits once, twice, then vanishes behind a neighboring roof. The breeze follows. There's a saying you recall now, perhaps Persian, perhaps borrowed and forgotten. The clever man cools his tea before drinking, but the wise man cools the room before brewing it. You smile. It's a bit smug, maybe, but accurate. Because here you are, atop a house built for wisdom. Every brick, every shaft, every vent was made with the intention not of conquering nature, but of partnering with it. A gentler victory, a slower one, the kind you can fall asleep to. You rise one last time and lean against the wind tower, listening to the cool hush it carries. It's not a loud sound. It's not even a whisper, really. More like breath, steady, calm, reliable. And that's what you'll remember later when the hum of modern life feels too sharp. That once, far away and long ago, people solved heat with height, light with clay, stillness with air. That once someone caught the wind and rather than bottling it, built it a home.
You linger at the rooftop edge where the final amber light brushes the tiles. But soon you descend again, each stair slightly cooler now than the one before. The wind tower hums quietly behind you, still working, still spinning invisible threads of comfort through the air. You step back into the main hallway, where soft light flickers from an oil lamp. It casts long shadows across the floor tiles, worn, mismatched, some painted, some plain. They weren't placed for symmetry. They were placed for use. And that's the thing about this home. It's not a palace. It's not a monument. It's a place that worked. And part of what made it work, you realize, was how well it cooperated with water. You hear it now, faint, steady, a trickle, like a stream whispering to itself. You follow the sound through a narrow door, duck slightly, and emerge into a room that feels like a secret. Cool stone walls, a basin in the center, and in one corner, there it is, a small channel of water flowing from a clay pipe winding gently around the edges. This is a kanat-fed cooling chamber. You've heard of kanats before, those ingenious underground tunnels that tap into aquifers and bring water over long distances without exposing it to the burning sun. A miracle of ancient engineering,
some of them stretching for miles, sloping with impossible precision to deliver water right where it's needed. And here, it ends in a whisper. You crouch beside the channel. The water is cold. Not just cooler than air cold, but genuinely chilly, as if it remembers a glacier long gone. It passes beneath your fingers and continues its path, disappearing under another wall. It doesn't wait for thanks. Historians still argue whether the Persians inherited the qanat technique from earlier Mesopotamian societies or developed it independently, but everyone agrees that they perfected it. The slope had to be exact. Too steep, and it flooded. Too shallow, and it stalled. Somehow, with nothing but hand tools and math done on clay tablets, they made it work. You dip your hand into the basin. It's shallow, maybe a hand's breadth deep, but the air above it is several degrees cooler than the rest of the room. That's the trick. The water draws heat from the air. And when air from the wind tower flows down into this space and meets the cool vapor above the basin, instant relief. No motors, no wires, just physics, just patience. You sit by the basin a while. Listen to it, the way it hums beneath the stone, like a lullaby for the house itself. There's a saying attributed to an old Persian gardener: "You do not water the root to drown it. You water the root to invite it." It applies here, too. The water isn't forced, it's invited. The wind isn't shoved, it's coaxed. This isn't about dominance, it's about collaboration. You imagine a child growing up in this home, dipping fingers in the water every morning, racing to see whose feet could reach the cool tile first. Maybe their parents whispered stories about where the water came from, that it flowed from a mountain far away, that it passed through sleeping earth and whispered to old stones. Maybe the stories were true. In the corner, a clay jar sweats slightly. You touch it. The outer surface is damp and cool, even though the room is dry. This is an olla, a porous pot designed to let water seep through and evaporate, another natural way to cool the air around it. You remember reading that sometimes people placed ollas in front of the wind shaft, letting the breeze pass over them and chill the house even more. A scientist might call it evaporative cooling. You call it clever. There's a fringe theory you've heard. Some scholars suggest certain wealthy households used rose water in their basins, not just for the scent, but because it evaporated more slowly, adding longevity to the cooling. That might be myth, or maybe just the ancient version of bougie. Still, the idea is oddly comforting. That even thousands of years ago, someone thought, what if this breeze also smelled amazing? You glance around the chamber. The light's dim now, coming only from a pierced brass lantern on the floor, its shadows forming tiny constellations on the walls. The water glints like silver in a dream. The trickle continues. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you could be anywhere, anywhen, just cooled. Then you hear footsteps, not real ones, but imagined, bare feet across stone, coming to check the basin level. You picture an old man in a loose saffron robe, bending to taste the water. He hums in satisfaction, leaves a pomegranate beside the jar, wanders out, humming a tune that's been passed through 3 generations and doesn't belong to anyone anymore. And you think, how strange that cooling a house, this essential thing, this basic need, was handled with so much artistry. Wind, water, space, shadow. A quiet alchemy. You touch the tile beside you. Cool. Almost tender. You wonder how many hands, how many breaths have passed through this room, cooling, collecting, waiting for the breeze, waiting for the water. And outside, the night deepens. The wind tower hums, the Connaught flows, and a fig tree rustles slightly in the yard as if shifting in its sleep. The fig tree rustles again, soft, unhurried. You rise slowly from the basin room, following the familiar corridor back toward the inner courtyard, your steps padded and steady on the worn clay tiles. The house breathes in rhythm with the night, and the further you walk, the more you begin to notice something subtle. The silence has layers. It's not absolute stillness. No, there's the rustle of tree leaves, the distant pad of goat hooves beyond the outer wall, the creak of a shutter nudged by the breeze. Even quiet homes like this one are never truly silent. They hum with living things, with stone and air in agreement. And somewhere in that hum, you begin to detect the human side of things, the small rituals that made all this work day after day. Because, you realize, wind towers alone did not cool Persian homes. People did. People, busy, barefoot, tea-sipping, curtain-tugging people who knew when to open which window, who draped damp cloth over certain vents, who moved bedding from one shaded nook to another, depending on the hour. You picture a woman rising just before dawn, her hair pinned up hastily, untying the reed screen from the courtyard's shaded side. She checks the sky, squints at the direction of the breeze, and props open a shutter. Not because she read a weather scroll, but because she's done this for 20 years and can feel when it's going to be a hot one. Historians still argue whether there was a standard method to household cooling across ancient Persia, or if every region adapted based on local winds and building materials. The truth probably lies in both. Overarching principles, yes, but also improvisation. 1,000 small tricks handed down like kitchen recipes. You step through the central arch, the inner garden now glimmering under starlight. The moon's low, not quite full, but enough to paint every fig leaf with silver. It casts faint reflections in the courtyard pool, a square basin surrounded by gravel and pomegranate trees. And seated at its edge, you imagine a young boy in a teal tunic, bent over, tying something to the foot of a pigeon. Not a trick of the mind, a memory you've borrowed. Messenger pigeons were often kept in ventilated lofts built near the wind towers. The rising air from the tower helped to keep the lofts dry and temperate, a practical climate for birds carrying names, poems, contracts, or, if legend is to be believed, love notes sealed with a kiss of saffron oil. You picture the boy whispering to the bird, "Fly east, but land only if the wind is soft," as if pigeons cared for poetry. Near the pool, another detail catches your eye, faint but deliberate. A line of flat clay tiles, sun-faded but still patterned with geometric script, laid in a winding trail from one side of the garden to another. These were called salsabil channels, shallow water channels designed not to water the garden but to cool it. Water would be poured slowly down their course, evaporating as it went, the moisture rising and blending with the air from the tower to soften the entire space. And you imagine the gardener again, barefoot, patient, carrying a copper bucket of well water at dawn, pouring it not for show, but as a gift to the breeze, a quiet collaboration. You pause now near the sleeping quarters, where woven screens shade the exterior. Each room has a bodgear facing opening, a small arch that catches redirected air from the main shaft and filters it into the bedrooms. They say these channels were often lined with cloth soaked in rose water or lemon balm. As the air passed through, it would carry the scent with it. Aromatherapy, ancient edition. You step inside one of the rooms. Low ceiling, thick walls, a simple bed platform of wood and reed matting, and in the corner, a clay jug resting in a shallow bowl. Not for drinking, at least not directly. The water would cool the air around it, and the surrounding space would remain noticeably fresher throughout the night. Clever, subtle, understated. You sit on the edge of the bed, listening to the sound of air moving gently through the arch. It doesn't whistle. It sighs. You think about what it would be like to fall asleep here, not with the roar of machinery or the buzz of electricity, but with a house that cooled itself like a creature, drawing breath, exhaling warmth, curling around its inhabitants like a calm cat in the dark. And this wasn't luxury. This was normal, middle class even. Which raises the question, if ancient Persians could engineer homes to work with their climate without exhausting fuel or making a racket, what exactly is our excuse? But you let the question float past you. You're not here to solve things. You're here to wander, to press your hand against a wall that's been cool for 8 centuries, to admire how someone once etched a verse into a brick near the vent that said, "Let the wind be your guest, and heat will not stay." That's probably better than anything you've written in your air-conditioned group chats. You picture one last scene before standing. A grandmother sitting beside this very arch, threading jasmine into a child's hair, humming softly to the tune of birds in the wind tower. Her eyes half closed, her tea unfinished, the air scented faintly with saffron and date syrup. You don't know her name, but the cool in this room remembers her. And as the moon rises higher, casting pale mosaics across the floor, you lie back, figuratively of course. The wind finds your cheek. The clay jug sweats slightly. Somewhere a pigeon rustles its feathers, and the house exhales again. Still listening, still cooling, still here.
You stay lying there a while longer, watching shadows shift slowly along the edge of the ceiling, their patterns broken only by the soft sway of a hanging reed screen. If you half close your eyes, the moonlight becomes a kind of watercolor, blurry, silvery brushstrokes across the earth-toned walls. And somewhere in that half-waking space, you start to think less about the towers and more about the people who lived under them. Not kings or architects, not even the clever stoneworkers who built the vents, but ordinary people. Shoemakers, weavers, storytellers. You picture a woman mending a sandal beneath the filtered light, dabbing rose water on the sole to soften the leather, not because it helps, but because her grandmother once did the same. There's a kind of cultural memory in this place, practical wisdom passed hand to hand without needing books. When the wind shifted, the shutters changed. When the date palms bore fruit, the basins were scrubbed clean. When someone was ill, the air was cooled, the tea was brewed, and the rooftop was swept, just in case that's what the illness needed. It's not superstition, it's care. Historians still debate whether Persian wind towers were originally inspired by Egyptian or Babylonian prototypes, or whether they truly emerged independently, shaped by the wind itself. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Winds don't obey borders, and neither do good ideas. You step outside again, through a narrow passage flanked with niches filled with clay pots and small woven fans. The corridor leads to the roof, a flat open space once used for drying fruits, weaving reed mats, and, if the wind behaved, sleeping under the stars. The stairs are shallow, worn into softness by generations of bare feet. You take them slowly, imagining a child once racing up with a bowl of lentils to scatter for the doves. Maybe she dropped some, and the sound of the scattering echoed off the tower, sharp and sudden like summer rain. At the top, the breeze hits you. Not a gale, just enough to make your robe shift slightly around your legs.
The city beyond glimmers in soft lantern flicker. Domes and towers and palms rise like shapes from a slow dream. The wind tower looms nearby, close enough to touch. Its brickwork is geometric, elegant in the way only something built to be both useful and beautiful can be. The arches at its top are open now, inviting. You peer into the shaft. It's dark and you can't see the base, but you feel it in your skin, that vertical breath of stone that has pulled the heat from rooms for hundreds of years. Not with noise, not with humming wires, but with stillness, with understanding. Below you, in the courtyard, the pool reflects stars. You hear a brief whistle of a night bird, and beside the wind tower there's a shadow. Someone else, perhaps, long ago, also watching the sky from this rooftop. You imagine two lovers meeting here, their parents asleep below, a borrowed moment suspended in jasmine-scented wind. One offers the other a preserved fig wrapped in palm leaf. They don't speak, words carry on rooftops, but a glance, a brush of hands, a shared breath in cool air, that's plenty. Elsewhere on the roof, a basket lies overturned. Inside, a half-finished reed fan and a tangle of threads. Someone got distracted. Maybe by the stars. Maybe by a whispered joke. Maybe by the sheer audacity of feeling peaceful in a world so often spinning. You lie down on the smooth plaster, the heat long gone from it, and stare up. Even now the wind tower makes small sounds, wooden slats creaking, rope ties fluttering. You trace its silhouette against the stars and think about how much thought went into this quiet machine. It doesn't just pull cool air, it creates a rhythm. Morning opens the east vents, evening closes the west. Rain is caught and filtered down clay pipes. Dust is blocked by angled flues. Even birds are discouraged from nesting inside. Small bells sometimes hung from the upper edges to chime gently and keep them away. Not loud, not angry, just a gentle suggestion. There's something touching in that, a building that makes room for comfort without driving anything away, that lives with the land rather than pushing against it. You imagine the festival nights, too. Lanterns hung from the tower edges, children running barefoot over the roof, their laughter caught in the updrafts, someone stringing rose petals across the railing, someone else pretending not to notice. On quieter nights like this one, a priest might climb to the roof to pray, his voice low, almost lost in the wind, not shouting, not demanding, just reminding the stars that someone down here is still paying attention. You shift slightly, feeling the faint texture of the plaster beneath your fingertips. Somewhere far below, a gate clicks, perhaps a neighbor returning late, perhaps a memory. You'll never know. And then the wind picks up slightly, just enough to lift your hair, just enough to make the prayer flags tied along the tower edge flutter once, and then fall still again. For a moment you wonder if the wind is listening, if it remembers the stories, the arguments, the lullabies it carried through these walls, the baby who wouldn't sleep, the old man who watched stars until his tea went cold, the pomegranate seller who shouted too early in the morning, all of them, all their breath, caught in the same wind. The stars turn above. You don't move. The house is still. The city sleeps, and the tower watches, waiting for the heat of tomorrow.
You don't fall asleep, not quite, but you hover near it, warm and adrift in this ancient rooftop world. Somewhere down below, water drips lazily into a basin, its rhythm steady as a heartbeat. You let the sound anchor you, pulling you gently back to earth, to this place where wind towers breathe and buildings know how to cool themselves without electricity. You imagine waking up just before dawn, the sky still deep indigo, that particular quiet that only exists when even the birds haven't decided what kind of day it's going to be. The air is already shifting, cooler on your skin than it has any right to be in a desert. You breathe in, and it smells like old stone, dried jasmine, and something else, maybe fig leaves or last night's bread. Down in the courtyard, someone stirs. You hear the soft brush of a broom against clay tiles. A woman in a russet tunic, hair tied back with a faded blue ribbon, sweeping the courtyard before the rest of the house wakes. Not because it's dirty, but because it's habit. Because the sound of sweeping is part of the morning here. She glances up at the wind tower, as if checking to see what kind of day the air intends to give her. There's no reading from a phone, no thermometer, just that simple act of listening to the wind, watching how the hanging beads sway in the entryway. And that's the heart of this place, isn't it? A house that speaks, gently, through air and water and shadow. Not a smart home, a wise one. You picture the inside of the house now, sunlight beginning to pool in long rectangles across the floor, filtered through those narrow, angled vents. The walls are thick, pale clay, painted with diluted ochre and geometric patterns that look like petals and stars. Nothing loud, nothing showy, just home. A boy is curled in a sleeping alcove, his blanket kicked half off. He'll be up soon, groggy and sun-warmed, following the smell of breakfast. Something involving lentils or date syrup, or maybe just flatbread toasted over coals and dipped in honey. You hear a kettle beginning to bubble. Clay, not metal. A woman's voice calls softly to someone in another room. A rustle of fabric, the creak of a shutter being pushed open. The day begins not with alarm clocks or email notifications, but with movement. Gentle, measured movement shaped by the house itself. Because the house breathes and the people follow its rhythm. Historians still argue whether these architectural traditions emerged from deep environmental intuition or from generations of trial and error, whether they were designed by master builders with mathematical precision or grown slowly like coral, adapting with every storm and season. There's evidence of both: clay tablets with air channel diagrams, oral stories passed down from fathers to sons, from grandmothers to grandchildren, and somewhere in between, unspoken wisdom. The kind you absorb just by living in a place long enough to notice which windows stay closed in the afternoon. You remember a story you once read. A traveling merchant lost in a sandstorm found his way to shelter by following the wind, not because it told him where to go, but because it reminded him where not to stand. He knelt behind a tower's base, wrapped his robe tight, and waited. When the dust cleared, the house was still standing, cool inside. And that's what these towers do. They don't fight the desert. They dance with it. A slow, practiced waltz that says, "We hear you. We feel your heat. We'll let it pass through us, but we won't let it settle." Back inside, the family is eating now. The boy from earlier chews slowly, eyelids still heavy. The mother sips tea laced with cardamom and looks out the lattice screen at the tower, the top of it now lit with morning sun. Light catches on the fine dust caught in the carved bricks, making them glow faintly gold. You notice a new shadow. Someone adjusting the tower's vents. A teenager in a saffron tunic climbing a narrow staircase with quiet skill. She pushes one shutter slightly wider, then ties a reed curtain back with a loop of dyed string. Not a chore, a ritual. She pauses for a moment, watching the pigeons wheel overhead. One feather flutters down, landing on the edge of the pool below. The air shifts again, like the house is exhaling. You wonder how many decisions were made in this air. Marriage proposals, market negotiations, apologies whispered, songs hummed, grudges dropped, all floating in the same currents that now drift past your cheek. And then you notice something odd. Just a small engraving near the tower base, half hidden by climbing vines. A swirl of symbols, maybe a name, maybe a blessing. You reach out, run your fingers across the carved grooves. Someone wanted to be remembered. Not with a statue, with a mark that only those who look closely will ever see. And that's what this whole house feels like. A quiet signature, not for tourists, not for glory, but for the people who live here and breathe here and grow old listening to the wind rattle in the slats. The sun is rising fully now. The sky is pale blue. You can hear merchants setting up in the nearby square, their carts creaking, their voices calling prices that haven't changed in 100 years. The city wakes. But here on the rooftop, you stay still a little longer, your breath synced to the pulse of this space. Because even in the brightening day, the house still hums, the wind still whispers, and the tower still watches. And maybe that's all you really need to know. In a world that runs too hot, too fast, there are places that learned long ago how to stay cool, how to be still, how to last.
By now, you barely notice the world beyond this rooftop. You're so settled into this gentle rhythm that the house feels more like a person than a building, a kind of companion. The kind that always seems to know when to bring you a cool breeze or let a patch of sunlight fall just where you want to sit. The wind tower continues its work, invisible but ever present. You watch it move the air with the grace of an old musician tuning a beloved instrument. No rush, no fanfare, just the same practiced hands doing what they've always done. The house isn't cooling itself for show. It's cooling itself because that's what houses do, or at least what they used to. You make your way down a narrow stairwell, stone steps curved slightly from centuries of footsteps. The air gets cooler with every step, the tower gently funneling a soft current down into the central hallway. You pass small windows fitted with lattice screens, carved from wood in looping patterns. They let in dappled light and privacy at the same time. The house is full of thoughtful contradictions like that. You hear soft singing now, not from a musician, but from someone grinding spices in the kitchen, a mortar and pestle rhythm layered with a lullaby you don't quite understand. The song has no beginning or end. It seems to exist just to pass the time, like wind circling in a tower. In the kitchen, it's dim but not dark. A shaft of gold light cuts across the floor, hitting a clay pot of soaking lentils. There's a bundle of herbs tied with twine hanging by the window. Mint, dried lime, maybe a curl of dried orange peel. Someone knew what they were doing, probably still does. On the far wall is a worn tile panel, pale turquoise and cream, showing a crude little sketch of a wind tower. Not a detailed diagram, just a childlike drawing. It makes you smile. Someone once loved this place enough to carve it into the wall. Or maybe they were just bored. Who can say? The kitchen leads into a central courtyard, which you now see with new eyes. That shallow basin of water at its center isn't just decorative, it's part of the cooling system. The tower pulls the air down, over the water, and into the rooms around it. Evaporation does the rest. It's clever, subtle, and still strangely magical even when you know the science. You sit beside it, dipping your fingers into the cool surface. The water is slightly scented, rosewater maybe, or crushed mint. Something added not because it's needed, but because it's kind. Like someone whispering, I see you. Rest a while. You think about all the people who sat here before you. Traders who'd crossed half the empire, children home from school, tired parents who just needed 5 minutes of quiet. Maybe a poet once wrote something here, listening to the splash of water echoing up the tower shaft. Maybe it was terrible poetry. Doesn't matter. The air was still good. Historians still debate whether the wind tower reached its peak in this period or if later designs were even more effective. Some argue the Persians perfected it. Others point to the Nabateans or the Omanis. But in truth, it's not a competition. These towers were never monuments. They were solutions, graceful answers to difficult questions. And now, sitting here, you realize the most impressive part isn't the engineering. It's the atmosphere, the quiet, the sense of generosity built into the walls. This house was made to share cool air. That's the whole point. Not to hoard it, not to trap it in sealed compartments, but to let it move freely, touching every room, every person equally. There's something profound in that, something tender. Outside, the day grows hotter. You can feel it pressing against the outer walls, see it in the shimmer of the distant rooftops. But inside, it stays calm. The tower adjusts, the house breathes, and you remain at ease. A girl walks through the courtyard, balancing a wooden tray with cups of tea. She wears a teal tunic and moves without urgency. She pauses for a moment at the water basin, glancing at the tower as if to thank it silently. Then she vanishes into the shadowed hallway. A pigeon flutters down to the edge of the courtyard, perches, coos once, then flaps away. A palm frond rustles softly overhead. Time seems to have forgotten this place, and that's not a complaint. You reach out and touch the wall beside you. It's warm from the sun, but not hot. The clay absorbs and diffuses the heat like a shield. Everything in this house, its materials, its proportions, its angles, works toward balance, toward harmony. There's something deeply human in that. And as you sit there, you realize something simple and lovely. You could live here. Not just visit, live. Wake to that breeze, walk barefoot on cool stone, share tea in the courtyard. Let the wind tell you what kind of day it'll be. Maybe you'd even sketch your own wind tower on the wall, crude and cheerful. And perhaps someday, someone else would sit where you're sitting, run their fingers over the same basin, and smile at your drawing. The house would still be here, still breathing, still kind. And you'd be part of its air.